Jessica Pegula survived a physical massacre in Charleston while the WTA executives sat in air-conditioned offices and watched her body break down for profit. The grueling 4 consecutive 3-set matches were not a coincidence, but a calculated failure by a system that values broadcast minutes over human life. While the tournament directors ignored the warning signs of exhaustion, Jessica Pegula transformed into the Iron Woman to fight a war she never should have been started. The WTA rulebook contains specific loopholes that allow officials to trap players in these 11-hour nightmares without any regard for long-term injury or career-ending fatigue. Legal documents and scheduling records prove that Steve Simon and the WTA leadership are intentionally sacrificing player safety to appease billionaire sponsors. Jessica Pegula's refusal to quit has exposed the entire corrupt operation, proving that the system tried to destroy her but only ended up destroying its own reputation. 11 hours, 5 matches, 1 champion. How much can one human body actually take before it completely snaps? The tennis world just watched a literal crime take place on the clay courts of Charleston. They call it a tournament, we call it a physical massacre. Jessica Pegula was forced into an 11-hour war that would have finished any other player on the tour. But while the fans cheered for the drama, a much darker reality was unfolding behind the scenes. The WTA was in total meltdown mode as their top seed was pushed to the absolute brink of a medical emergency. This wasn't just tennis, this was a calculated test of survival. The executives were hoping for a spectacle, and they got one at the expense of a woman's health. The reality is that Jessica Pegula was trapped in a nightmare. For 4 straight days, she was dragged into deep, soul-crushing 3-set battles. Every single time she stepped on that court, the system demanded more blood. She spent over 11 hours under the scorching sun and the heavy humidity. Her breath was ragged, her legs were shaking. You could see it in her eyes during the changeovers. She wasn't just playing an opponent, she was fighting a schedule that was designed to make her fail. The tournament directors didn't care about the recovery time. They didn't care about the lactic acid buildup or the risk of a heart event. All they cared about was the prime time slot. The documents prove that the scheduling in Charleston was a procedural failure of the highest order. Pegula was forced to play back-to-back matches with almost 0 rest while the villains in the front office counted the ticket sales. It was a 1,000-minute torture test. Think about that for a second. Most people can't walk for 11 hours straight. Jessica Pegula was sprinting, sliding, and hitting at max power for that entire duration. The hero was being sacrificed for the show. Every time she fell behind, the commentators talked about her grit. They should have been talking about the negligence. They should have been asking why a multi-million-dollar organization was letting this happen. But Jessica Pegula is not your average player. They call her the Iron Woman for a reason. While her body was screaming for her to stop, her mind took over. She survived the first 3-setter against a fresh opponent who had half the court time. Then she did it again and again. The villainous WTA leaders thought she would fold. They wanted a new face in the final. They wanted the drama of an upset. But Pegula refused to give them the satisfaction. She leaned on her racket between points just to stay upright. She was breathing so hard, it sounded like a heartbeat over the stadium speakers. This was a woman fighting a war against a rigged system. The first half of this nightmare was purely physical. Pegula's muscles were literally tearing themselves apart to keep her in the game. The meltdown wasn't happening on the court, it was happening in the WTA headquarters. They realized that if Pegula got seriously hurt, the blood would be on their hands. But instead of intervening, they doubled down. They kept the matches on the main court, they kept the cameras rolling, they wanted every second of her suffering recorded for the highlight reels. It was a disgusting display of corporate greed. They saw a hero in pain, and they saw dollar signs. As the hours ticked past the 10-hour mark, the situation turned from a sports story into a medical emergency. Anyone watching could see the physical toll. Her movement was becoming heavy, her reactions were slowing. This is when the calculated lies of a tour started to surface. They claimed the schedule was fair and balanced. The reality is that it was a death trap. Jessica Pegula was playing for her life, while the villainous executives were laughing in the VIP lounge. They thought they could break her. They thought the Iron Woman would finally rust under the pressure of an 11-hour nightmare. But what happened next was even more shocking. Pegula didn't just survive, she dominated the moments that mattered. She took all that pain and turned it into a weapon. The more the system tried to crush her, the stronger she became. It was a total embarrassment for the WTA. Their top seed was proving that she was bigger than their broken rules. She was winning points she had no business winning. She was outrunning players who were 10 years younger and had played half the hours. This was the ultimate middle finger to Steve Simon and the rest of the leadership. Now we have to look at the bigger WTA playbook. This isn't just about one tournament in Charleston. This is a systemic failure that goes all the way to the top. The WTA rulebook contains specific clauses that are supposed to protect players from excessive play. But those rules are a total sham. They are written in a way that gives all the power to the tournament directors. If the TV networks want a match at 9 p.m. after a player just finished at 4 p.m., the player has no choice. It is a form of modern-day gladiatorial combat. The players are the ones bleeding, while the executives are the ones collecting the checks. The evidence is clear. The industry is starting to distance themselves from these dangerous practices. Financial reports show that the WTA is struggling, and they're trying to fix their balance sheets by working their stars to death. They think that more marathon matches equal more engagement. They're gambling with the careers of women like Jessica Pegula. The reality is that the accusations against the WTA leadership are finally sticking. People are starting to see the calculated lies for what they are. They claim to be player first, but the 11-hour war proves they're money first. The Iron Woman survived, but the system is failing. Look at the data from the last 3 seasons. Injuries are up, burnout is at an all-time high, and it's all because the villainous leadership refuses to change the rules. They want the players to be robots. They want them to play 11 hours a week, every week, for 11 months a year. It's a recipe for disaster. Pegula's innocence in this is absolute. She followed every rule. She showed up for every match. She did her job perfectly. The only people who failed were the ones in charge of the sport. The WTA executives like to pretend that these long matches are just part of the beauty of the game. That is a lie. There is nothing beautiful about a player being unable to walk after a quarterfinal. There is nothing heroic about a tournament that forces its biggest star to risk a permanent injury just to satisfy a broadcast contract. The industry is waking up to this. Sponsors are starting to ask questions. If the hero gets hurt because of a bad schedule, the brand takes a hit. The villain's plan is backfiring in real time.
The documents prove that Pegula had requested a later start time to recover. The request was denied. Why? Because the villain wanted the ratings. They knew a Pegula match would draw more eyes than anyone else. They deliberately put her in a position where she had the least amount of rest possible. It was a setup. They wanted her to lose so they could talk about the shocking upset. But Pegula turned the script on them. She showed the world that even a rigged system can't stop a hero with enough heart. Let's talk about the physical implications of 11 hours on court. Medical experts confirm that this level of exertion causes microscopic tears in the heart muscle. It causes neurological fatigue that can lead to major falls and ligament tears. The WTA knows this. They have the medical staff, they have the data. They simply chose to ignore it. They treated Jessica Pegula like a piece of equipment instead of a human being. The meltdown we are seeing now is the result of the world finally calling them out on their bullshit. The WTA playbook is falling apart. For years, they have used weather delays as an excuse to cram matches together. But in Charleston, the weather wasn't the main issue. The issue was the greed of the organizers. They wanted too many matches on the stadium court. They refused to move play to the outside courts because there were no cameras there. They sacrificed Pegula's health for a better camera angle. It is a disgusting, shameful reality that the documents now confirm. The industry is moving away from Steve Simon's vision. Other sports have strict rest and recovery mandates. Tennis is the only major sport where you can be asked to perform at a world-class level for 3 hours, 3 days in a row with no end in sight. The villain thought they could hide behind the tradition of the sport, but the Iron Woman of Charleston changed the conversation forever. She didn't just win a trophy, she won a battle for every player on the tour. She showed the world that the players are the ones with the power, not the suits in the offices. The reality is that Jessica Pegula is a miracle. Most players would have retired. Most players would have complained to the press and tanked the match. But Pegula is a truth teller. She let her tennis do the talking. She showed the world exactly how broken the system is by overcoming it. She proved that the WTA's procedural failures are not enough to stop a champion. But she shouldn't have had to prove it. No one should have to go through an 11-hour war just to do their job. The accusations against the tournament's management are piling up. Former players are speaking out. They are calling the Charleston schedule cruel and unusual. The villainous narrative that this was just a great week of tennis is being shredded by the facts. 11 hours of match time is more than some players play in an entire month. It was a physical assault disguised as a sporting event. And through it all, Pegula remained the hero. She never lashed out, she never gave up, she just kept hitting the ball. The second half of the scandal is the financial evidence. The WTA has been losing money for years. They are desperate for viral moments. They thought an 11-hour marathon would be their ticket to a viral hit. They were right, but not for the reasons they wanted. It went viral because people were horrified. It went viral because fans were angry. The hero's innocence was clear, and the villain's greed was on full display. The industry is now distancing itself from the blood sport mentality that the WTA has adopted. The documents prove that there were multiple opportunities to give Pegula a break. There were open courts, there were earlier time slots. Every single one was bypassed to maximize the theatrical value of her exhaustion. It was a calculated lie to tell the public that nothing could be done. Everything could have been done. They just didn't want to do it. They wanted to see if the Iron Woman would break. They wanted to see if they could destroy the hero for a few more clicks on their social media pages. But the plan failed. Jessica Pegula didn't break. She became a legend. Her reputation has skyrocketed, while the WTA's reputation is in a free fall. The executives thought they were in control. They thought they could manipulate the schedule to create a specific outcome. But the truth always comes out. The reality of those 11 hours is now a stain on the history of the Charleston tournament. It is a permanent record of how the system tried to exploit its biggest star and failed miserably. The industry is now calling for a complete overhaul of the scheduling rules. The Pegula rule is being discussed in locker rooms across the world. No player should ever be forced into an 11-hour war again. The villain thought they could use Pegula to save their failing business model. Instead, they used her to expose why the business model needs to be burned to the ground. The hero survived the nightmare. The villain is just beginning theirs. Jessica Pegula's career is on a path to the Hall of Fame. Her resilience in Charleston will be remembered for decades, not because of the points she won, but because of the torture she endured. She stood up to a corrupt system and came out on top. She is the Iron Woman, and no amount of procedural failure or calculated lies can take that away from her. The WTA tried to turn her into a victim, but she turned herself into a symbol of defiance. The villain's reputation is now in total ruin. Steve Simon and his team are facing a revolt from the players. They can't hide behind their rule book anymore. The facts are out, the evidence is clear. The 11-hour war was a disgrace. It was a moment where the sport lost its way and a hero found her greatest strength. The world is finally seeing the WTA for what it really is, an organization that will break its own stars for a bit of extra cash. The marathon queen is still standing. After 11 hours of suffering, after 5 matches of pure physical hell, and after 1,000 minutes of fighting a rigged system, Jessica Pegula is the only one left with her head held high. She survived the nightmare. She reigned again. And she did it all while the people in charge tried to make her fail. The system is broken, but the hero is unbreakable. Jessica Pegula thought she was just playing tennis, but she was actually fighting for the future of the sport. She exposed the villain playbook and showed the world the truth. The WTA thought they'd destroy Pegula, but they only destroyed themselves.